when he's allowed to dedicate himself just to football and teach a little bit more of the craft to him and put on some weight onto an already pretty good frame, that's a dangerous defensive back right there, Kevin.
Hello and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here as always with my good friend Ryan Wallace. We're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. We attended the second edition of the Kansas City Varsity Combine at St. Pius High School this last Saturday, and we have plenty of content from that, talking about players who caught our eye, including 2 of the top 10 players in KCMO, and we'll have an interview with one of those 2 players, St. Pius linebacker Mason Wright, from the event. As always, if you like what you're hearing, comment below, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us with a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All those things help us with the algorithm, help us to grow the show, and help put us in front of more recruiting heads like yourselves. Ryan, we have a lot of combine talk to get into, but first we have an alarm.
Hey, here we go.
Of course, that means one of the local schools picked up a commitment, and in this case, it's Pearland, Texas linebacker Joseph Credit, who picked Kansas over several other Power 4 offers. Ryan, what stood out to you when you watched Credit's tape?
Well, I liked what I saw of Joseph Credit, and obviously he's a guy that comes with some high accolades in terms of the offers that he got. Obviously, you don't see Texas in there. You don't see Oklahoma. But you brought up a good point before we started recording that, sometimes the measurements, don't necessarily fit what those envision their linebackers to look like. But A&M offered, Texas Tech offered. I think there's a lot of good things that you see from Joseph Credit that those programs saw that I think KU saw very early on. And Kevin, when I saw him, this sounds kind of weird to say for a linebacker, but the trait that I really liked most about him was he's evasive.
Yeah.
He uses kind of that, if you want to call it undersized, he uses that frame to his advantage, and he's tough to get a hold of and is very instinctual and violent at the point of contact. Kevin, I'll just put it this way, and I hate to, throw out the comps that are, from guys of KU's past from some of their greatest teams of all time. So sorry to Joseph for putting, I'm raising the bar here for you, buddy.
Sure.
There's some Joseph Mortensen to me here, because what is Credit, like 6 foot 220 already, 230 already? And Mortensen is, I think when he graduated was like 6'1", 250. But again, kind of a thumper, right? And was probably better in space than he got credit for. So I see a little bit of Mortensen in Credit.
Yeah, I actually see a little bit of ties to a guy KU had last year, and that's Cornell Wheeler. Before Cornell Wheeler got hurt, I thought he was on track for a really big season. If you watch Kansas against like Illinois could not run the ball, and that was something that a lot of us kind of circled heading into the game, where we said, hey, with Fagan, is Illinois just going to line up and push Kansas around? And Cornell Wheeler, he kind of had a similar thing where he flies under the radar a little bit, has a little bit of that agility that you're talking about, the loose hips, the
right,
ability to kind of make a play within the hole. And both of them, I think, have tremendous short area quickness to get from, hey, I'm a yard away from my target, we're both at a dead stop, I can get this guy to the ground before he can lose me. And I think that's something that I really like with Credit. Of course, to sort of bring this home, Ryan, guy that ran 11 flat on the track in the 100 meters this spring, a guy that when you pair him with a local guy in Josh Galbraith with the athleticism that we know that Galbraith has, this looks like a really nice athletic linebacking core and a group that Kansas wanted to upgrade the athleticism in.
No doubt. And again, to tie it in for K-State fans out there too, and I think KU fans will identify as well, as you mentioned Cornell Wheeler. Look, everybody wants the Fred Warner at Mike linebacker, right? But sometimes you come to appreciate that some of the smaller guys kind of fit that between the tackles presence. And again, from a K-State perspective, some of the best kind of interior linebackers that I feel like the Wildcats had there for a stretch were like Arthur Brown and Jonathan Truman. And Truman played a little bit more weak, but both of those guys were like 6 foot on a good day, So look, if you can be a hunter for the ball, you're gonna have stick at middle linebacker. And I think Credit will do just fine in Lawrence.
Credit's commitment gives the Jayhawks 15 commitments in the 2026 class. That currently ranks 8th nationally, according to 24/7 Sports. We usually get to our prospect profiles in this space where we each pick a player, one from Kansas and one from Missouri, who's been catching our eye. But we have about 80 billion picks over the course of this show, Ryan. So we're going to go ahead and give prospect profiles officially a week off, but in reality, it's almost like we're doing extra prospect.
I was going to say, we got lots of profiles to get to.
So heading into a camp or combine, you can get a little bit of a feeling for what the talent level is going to be like when you look at those camp rosters or what's expected to show up. And I tell you what, Ryan, I was absolutely tickled pink when we saw that 2 of our top 10, 26 players on the Missouri side of Kansas City were going to be in attendance on the aforementioned Mason Wright of St. Pius and Raytown cornerback Armand Weathers.
Yeah, I mean, these are 2 guys that we were dying to see in person. A lot of times when we start off with our top 10s, it is kind of based on huddle. Especially for the Missouri side, that I feel like last year, we'll be honest, we struggled at times to get across the state line and see a lot of those guys in person. So we wanted to make it a point to really dive into some tape and also make it a point this offseason to see some of those guys. And so to see 2 of our initial top 10 guys, this was enormous, Kevin. And I thought, when you speak about enormous, I think both Wright and Weathers lived up to that, at least in terms of physically speaking. When those guys showed up, and put on their KC varsity attire, they stood out. They were the all off the bus team last Saturday.
Let's start off with Weathers real quick, because I know that he's a guy in particular that you really wanted to see, especially with the types of wide receivers that were going to be at this thing. You had Braden Stevens. You had some guys who were really quick in space. You also had some bigger targets like a Roger Haney. And so you got to see him sort of covering the gamut. And Ryan, I really thought not only was he as advertised, but I was really impressed with the competitive chops. The fact that he was a guy that didn't have problems talking a little bit, that didn't have a problem. Even if he lost a rep, he was right there the next rep, ready to win that rep. And I think I came away as impressed with his mentality, maybe even in a competitive setting, as I did the physical gifts, which are pretty good.
Well, and I mean, to your point, like when you talk about kind of stepping up to the challenge, I'm not sure, a couple of days beforehand, if this was something that Armand was really interested in. But you get a couple people in his ear, and he accepted the challenge. And to your point, Kevin, as well, like I thought he lived up to it, and we got to see him again go against a little bit of everything at the wide receiver position. I thought Weathers, held his own, and let's be honest too, a really good DB group as well. Moody from Platte County was there again, a guy that I've sung his praises for the last year. DJ Bronson at Park Hill, we thought, you and I were really impressed with what he put out there. Key Harrison was there, another player that we'll get to in a little bit. So, I mean, for Weathers to stand out, I thought it proved again how good he was just in that setting amongst the DBs, but also how good he was against a variety of different receivers. And wrapping things up with Weathers, Kevin, I think it's interesting that he's still maybe not a finished product, right?
Sure.
Because he's 6'1" and change, 175-ish, 174 pounds, I think officially. But the 75-inch wingspan was there, 120-inch broad jump and almost 35-inch vertical. So athletically, everything you want is there. And I think technically he's continuing to make pretty big gains. It's going to come down to speed for him. We've talked about it the last 2 shows of like trying to get over that 20 mile an hour kind of threshold. And at least from a 10-yard fly perspective, he was right in there at 19.6. I think the highest level is still going to want to see how fast he can be in terms of his change in direction, maybe that 40 time. We'll see if he can get there. I know that there's several folks out there at Raytown that are still working with him. Coach Fletch, Coach Dom Jacinto. That is a point of emphasis here these next couple weeks. Can he do it? I'll say this, even if he doesn't, Kevin, knowing what we saw on the field and knowing just his physical makeup, he's one of those guys that like coaches might watch at camp and might not be satisfied with his testing in June. I don't think they're going to fully erase him from their board.
Yeah.
He strikes me as a guy that's like, let's circle back to this. And maybe, if we have some room, maybe this, again, we talk about all the time, maybe he'll be worth a quote flyer on late because there's just so many other things that you can't teach when it comes to Armand Weathers.
You mentioned Key. Obviously, Key is his high school teammate, not a secondary that you want to throw the ball against from a competitiveness standpoint, and how good those two guys are. The highest ranked player in attendance, Ryan, according to our rankings this spring, at least according to us here at Verbal Commitment, was St. Pius linebacker Mason Wright by just a couple of spots over Weathers. And I want to set you up here by pointing out something that you said on Saturday when we kind of picked him out of the crowd at linebacker. You said that's what an outside linebacker looks like.
I mean, 6'3", every bit of 6'3", 210 pounds, 75 and a quarter inch wingspan. He ran 19.8 on his 10-yard fly. So that's moving for a guy that, again, his 210 pounds looks like 230. Under 4 shuttle, 121 inch broad, and a almost 38 inch vertical from Mason Wright. And boy, I mean, he lived up to it and then some. He's a guy that we haven't talked a whole lot about, so I did pull some clips for him for this particular show, and you just see the get off. He closes space in a hurry, and you saw that in drills. You saw that in one-on-one. Again, I think he's really good for a bigger body in space. He has no problem getting out there. Here he is taking on Drew Clemens. That's a tight end that committed to and signed with Utah, and he just knocks him off the line. Again, you see him here. He's very smart in terms of how he closes space, the timely manner that he does it in. Obviously, physicality is kind of his calling card with his size, and you see it in all the clips that we just showed you. It's a non-padded event at KC Varsity from the skill position standpoint. So we honestly got to see him, if you want to call it, at maybe his weaker, point of his game, right? The non-physical side. But Kevin, like watching him go through the bags and do some of the agility work, watching him, flip his hips and get out in some of the coverage drills and then line up and do well in one-on-ones with the running backs. Like, I think he's every bit a linebacker right now. And I think the way that we saw his body and his physique, where he is heading into his senior year at Pious, I'm not here to say that he couldn't be some sort of hybrid too at Sam, where you could bring him off the edge, creep him up on some sort of assigned blitz. I was just really, really impressed with Mason Wright, and a guy, honestly, that we had at 8, like you said, that now after watching him and knowing what Pious has on that roster, and probably what I would assume, no pressure, Pious, what I would assume to be a lengthy season for the Spartans. This is a kid that's going to have every opportunity to creep up our top 10.
I think I asked him which camp drills, he kind of shined at, and, he said, hey, anything I can do in space. Well, when he puts the pads on, I like seeing him work in a phone booth too. It's a lot of fun. He generates a lot of power, a lot of athleticism. And to your point, he's going to go to bed one day and wake up and he'll be 6'3", 230 without blinking. So it's not going to be difficult for him to add good quality weight and wind up looking the way that you've sort of traditionally seen outside linebackers.
The other thing too, Kevin, is like, I think coaches are going to, those that maybe haven't met him or haven't had extensive conversations with him yet, this summer, when they have a chance to meet him at camps, I think they're going to fall in love. Kind of a teaser for the interview coming up at the end of our show, because boy, I mean, just the most polite, respectful kid in the world, that is a really good student as well. So all those kind of potential red flags that coaches are always trying to look for in certain prospects, they won't find any when it comes to Mason Wright.
Smart kid. Well, he'll talk about his offers, but when you have offers from all the service academies, when you've got offers from Ivies, you probably have the character thing figured out to a certain extent. We'll have that interview with Wright, including a look at where his recruitment stands later on in the show. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. I think, fingers crossed, that we're out of cold season and rounding into that balmy late spring, early summer heat wave. And Home Field has you covered with all kinds of t-shirts and shorts to support your favorite school and look cool doing it. Staying cool as well. Kansas State, and Missouri currently have more than 40 items apiece to choose from, so head on over to homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code link below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
It's playoff time, and if you're still just watching games, then you're missing out. With Pick 6 from DraftKings, you can turn your hoops knowledge into real cash. Just make your picks, track your score, and if you hit all 6, you're looking at bigger payouts than Prize Picks flex plays. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competitor, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. And right now, new customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
We're back with the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Saturday marked the second KC Varsity Combine at St. Pius High School, and with a group that was probably a little bit more loaded than the first one. And it gave us a chance to see a number of top players from across the area. Also, I wanted to give a really quick shout out to Wayne Orr, who doesn't just put on a great camp, but really went above and beyond to make sure that we had everything we needed for this show. So, Wayne, thank you. Ryan, we've talked about the highest ranked prospects that attended the camp, but I want to focus in on a few players who really made their mark and maybe improved their standing with their performances. We teamed up to pick 3 players that we thought were sort of the biggest winners from the event. First off, for those of you who don't know, KC Varsity Combines are known kind of for their King of the Hill event, which is an elimination competition among the big boys to find the best lineman in attendance, rewarding that player with a WWE or heavyweight boxing style championship belt. Always makes for some fun photos. And Lawrence High School offensive guard Bailey Johnson took home the crown on Saturday. Ryan, what'd you see from Bailey?
Well, I was going to say, I'm old enough and a longstanding member of the KC Varsity media team to remember when they used to give out a slab of ribs to the winner of the King of the Hill. Then Wayne upgraded to the belt, but I'm not sure Bailey Johnson wouldn't have preferred the ribs. This is a kid, 365 pounds. So first off, off the hoof, you're kind of going, is there going to be some agility there? Like, is he going to struggle in one-on-ones. And Kevin, you pointed out you had seen him 2 weeks ago at Pious and said, just wait. And sure enough, you were spot on, man. This Lawrence Lion was a blast to watch. And here's the thing, lighter on his feet than I gave him credit for right out of the gate. You know, a kid that you talk about wanting to see Mason Wright in a phone booth. Bailey Johnson wins constantly in a phone booth, and Team Fun Tape all over the place. He's just an absolute road grader specimen. He's so powerful. I mean, anybody that tried to bull rush him, that tried to take him one-on-one in strength, lost every single time. And you see, though, he is pretty nimble. You know, is he the most athletic guy in the world? No, probably not. But also, he's nimble enough where you can't really get around him. I love this clip here. Look at the end here, Kevin. There's no one in the screen. I mean, there's absolutely nobody in the shot in that frame because he ends up knocking over his own guys too. And you saw the Lawrence offense last year, you know, with Banks Bowen and that team. I mean, Bailey Johnson was one of the guys that they ran behind over and over and over again. So, you know, a kid that I think, yes, you know, do you want to see him get a little bit more agile? Yeah. Pass pro, you know, we heard it from Chris Gomez last week. You know, that's the one thing that seems like high school guys probably need to shore up a little bit more. And I'm sure, you know, that's something that Bailey Johnson probably needs to work on if he's gunning for the highest of offers. But again, Kevin, I mean, like, there were people that did try and beat him with speed rush. There were people that did try and beat him with power. And again and again and again, did he lose a rep? I don't think he lost a rep the entire King of the Hill. I think he was the only lineman that didn't lose a rep. Or tied, maybe?
He didn't lose a rep once they went down to the main field for like the King of the Hill itself. In one-on-ones, one of our later guys did get him. But no, it was one of those things too, Ryan, where anybody who was a defensive tackle had no chance because you couldn't match his strength or power level. And the couple times he did get matched up with a little bit more of an edge type kid, I mean, he punched that kid into oblivion. I mean, basically threw him out the club. And so when you look at him, he did really well in the King of the Hill event 2 weeks ago. He was a guy that went a really long ways, didn't ultimately wind up winning. But this time he finished the job. And like you said, he was dominant doing it. I think it's interesting because I think he needs a very specific fit, right?
Yes.
So many teams want to run that zone running game where it's so important for you to sort of be a dancing bear, be able to keep your feet, get moving downhill. That's not necessarily who he is. I don't know what level he's going to play on because of that fit question, but I'll tell you this, Ryan, he's not a guy you want to be opposite on 3rd and 1.
Right. And the other thing that I'll say to finish up about the scheme fit too is that there might be some camps where he goes against, you know, guys that are quicker off the gun, right? Guys that have better hand-to-hand combat, guys that, again, can get around him. And maybe one-on-ones, at least at this combine it worked, but maybe at bigger camps and combines, you know, he wouldn't fare as well one-on-one. But when he's in the right fit, and you have to imagine that he's got help to his right and help to his left,
sure,
then he's an even bigger problem. So I'm with you, Kevin. I'm intrigued to see where Bailey Johnson's recruitment goes from here because he's been dominant for 2 straight KC Varsity Combines anyway.
One of those guys who had to go against those interior offensive linemen and who more than held his own was our second winner, Bishop Miege, defensive tackle Devin Davis. Ryan, this is a guy that you pointed out pretty early on in the combine as somebody that you wanted to see, and I really thought he showed out.
Yeah, because on tape, when I watched him and kind of added him to our, you know, what's become a lengthy list of players in the Metro, he's just a guy that it was very intriguing, just because of the way that, you know, John Holmes and that staff over with the Stags are able to move him around like a chess piece on the defensive line. And so again, it was one of those players that caught my attention from his junior tape because he is a 2026 prospect. And the way that he's able to beat guys with speed, as you see here in the playoffs against Tonganoxie. But then you'll see other times, like here against Lewisburg, where he is at more of that defensive tackle, and he is kind of shoving guys around and being able to, you know, hold his ground and run support. What we were able to then kind of confirm, having watched him now in person at the KC Varsity Combine is that he does have a little bit of get off. There is some juice there. And also, Kevin, I thought that from a stature standpoint, he's a guy that I think you could easily put some weight onto and have him be kind of that agile defensive tackle. Maybe not a true nose, but a guy that, you stack some weight on and can still keep the juice, because his 10-yard fly was almost 18 miles an hour. So he's a guy that, again, has some of that get off, and I think has a pretty good size frame as it is, where I think he would transition very easily to that athletic defensive tackle, specifically in a 4-man front, but maybe even, playing a little bit more inside as a defensive end in a 3-man front.
Had some quickness to his feet, Ryan, but also quickness to his hands. Was in some reps with that hand-to-hand combat. Obviously, those guys are really well coached over at Bishop Miege, John Holmes, and those guys do a great job. And I thought he was maybe one of the more polished interior defensive linemen in attendance in terms of understanding, hey, I'm not just trying to go through this guy's chest. How do I win this rep and actually get home? I thought he had a better understanding than most of the guys in attendance.
Absolutely.
All right, last but certainly not least, you mentioned that strong group of defensive backs, Ryan, and I think we both thought that Blaine Marshall of Blue Springs South, a guy we've mentioned on the show previously, probably even exceeded our expectations for where we thought he was going to be.
You can go back to our show in February when we unveiled the top 10 in KCMO, and you brought him up. We had extensive conversations. He was sniffing our top 10. I mean, it was kind of between him and Armand Weathers, to be very frank. And we went with Weathers, and we will have some extensive conversations now moving into the summer. Blaine Marshall gave us a lot to think about. I thought he was the biggest winner at this event. And what we saw from his junior tape is exactly what we saw last Saturday. It's the instincts, it's the timing, it's the athleticism, the length. Plays like this. I mean, he didn't do quite that on Saturday, but a play like this where you're able to see him, really time the contested catch and then go up and make the PBU. He was making that happen repeatedly on Saturday. And again, doing it against speed, doing it against bigger bodies like a Devin Haney. He's so good at the underneath route, Kevin. You cannot throw it against him. That's why, I'm not opposed to him again playing like a free safety, because I think it allows him, if you want to put him at corner, that's fine. But I think safety kind of allows him to use the instincts that are so good, use his athleticism and the timeliness that he has to come up and make plays. The one thing that we'll still probably want to see from him this fall is, coming up and tackling. How does he play downhill? But man, I mean, he was just so good. 20 miles an hour in his 10-yard fly from a velocity standpoint, 33 vert. And here's the other thing, as I pitch it back to you, Kevin, is you and I were so impressed with just his overall play. And yet then you start to talk to some of the coaches that were in attendance, right? And one in particular, OJ Simpson, that was the wide receivers coach at the event, but is also an assistant coach at Blue Springs South. And, he's reminding us something that we knew, but you need to be reminded when you watch Blaine Marshall. He's kind of a pup on the football field, because he's an all-state level basketball player for Blue Springs South, at least a starting guard on a very good team. And I think for a very long time, up until maybe very recently, it was a basketball first kind of mindset for him. When he's allowed to dedicate himself just to football and teach a little bit more of the craft to him, and put on some weight onto an already pretty good frame, that's a dangerous defensive back right there, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of him being a center fielder and getting to put his ball skills really on display, because I think he tracks the ball so well in the air. I don't know if it's the basketball background. I don't know if it's just natural. Also, I want to say, Ryan, the best wide receiver DB rep I thought that we saw the entire day was he against Braden Stevens. And Stevens ran just a terrific route. He's blazing fast. And I think the most impressive part of it was having the recovery speed.
Yeah.
To catch back up while that ball is in the air, to make a play and ultimately knock it down. There was nothing that Braden did wrong on that play. No. And 98% of the corners would have been absolute toast in that situation. And he even got a step or two, but it was a step or two that ultimately got made up, and ultimately the pass got knocked down.
And Blaine is so good too. I think some of it is maybe he does have a faulty step here or there. He does need to recover, but I think some of it too is just baiting quarterbacks. He kind of wants you to think a guy's open. And, wrapping it up on Blaine too, kind of along those same lines that you were talking about with Braden, where it's like, man, he did everything right. There were several reps where you could see like a wide receiver might come down with an incredible catch, right? And the wide receiver's getting up and he's holding the ball, and you could tell Blaine was kind of like, upset at himself that he allowed the catch. And you and I are looking at each other like, that was an outstanding rep by Blaine. Yeah. Like he won the rep. Credit to the receiver for making like, an insane catch that was probably out of bounds to begin with. But you're like, man, he won the rep. You know what I mean? So, and I know that sounds backwards because like, well, how do you win the rep if the guy catches it? You have to be that you'll understand in a combine setting what we're talking about if you're there. But
no pads or anything like that too. Yeah.
You're just going, man, Blaine, like that was terrific coverage, right? Like let it go. And he did. And honestly, those were really the only catches that he allowed were kind of some insanely lucky ones.
Mac Brown has a saying he used to say all the time, the other guys got guys on scholarship too, just basically you can do a lot of things right. Other guys are still going to make plays every now and then. And a couple of those reps didn't go his way where it was, hey, the coverage is perfect. There's nowhere to go with that ball. There's no window. A guy just made a contested catch where you played the ball well. Even, and he still made a contested catch. That's not on you. So those were kind of our consensus winners. But we also wanted to pick a couple more 2026s, one apiece, who really flashed and caught each of our attention before doing the same exact thing for 2027 and 2028. So the 2026s, Ryan, let's go ahead and get into those sort of flash guys. I know you had Gavin Nash of Blue Springs South. I went with Roland By of Winnetonka. What about Gavin stood out to you, especially since, it seems like it did seem like he was a guy that we went in looking at, and even then, he was another guy that probably exceeded where we thought he would be.
Well, the reason that I went with Gavin Nash here is, Peyton Hatfield was absolutely fantastic. I want to give him mention. But the reason that you and I didn't go with Peyton here is because, like, that was our first time seeing Peyton Hatfield in the flesh. But everybody that's seen the Hatfields at Lee Summit is like, yeah, well, that was just another day for them at the park, right? So they didn't flash. They did what was expected. Diver McCray, a guy that we've talked about on this show that was among the fastest players in attendance, right? A kid from Leavenworth. He could have fit here. But again, like we kind of knew what to expect from Diver. When it comes to Gavin Nash, this is a kid that on his own team at Blue Springs South is kind of overshadowed at times. Blaine Marshall on the other side, Gary Hill on the offensive side, Aiden Wilhelm on the offensive side, Darius Morgan. You forget about Gavin Nash, and he's a little diminutive. He's 5'8", 165 pounds. There's not a lot of wingspan there, small hands. The vertical is there, 32 inches. But the thing that is just incredible to me and why I picked Gavin Nash here as my flash performer is I don't know if he really lost a rep either, Kevin.
Yeah.
He is so crafty. He is so good in his route running. I thought he's got a pretty stout frame for being 5'8", 165. Like, I think he's going to be able to absorb contact really well. And like I said, I think at some point, I love guys that are just really, really good route runners. Sometimes you put the speed stuff aside, you put the size stuff aside, and you think back to the Darius Shepherds, you think back to Luke Grimms, and guys that can absolutely carve up defensive backs are just, it doesn't matter if they're not super fast or super long. They win. And Gavin Nash is a straight winner. And he did it over and over again on Saturday. He was my flash performer, and I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on him senior year.
There's always a market for guys who get open and catch the ball. I'm actually going to go into the trenches for my pick. And it may be a little unfair because Ryan only gets one pick, I get one pick, and rolling by was a guy that Ryan actually found first. He was kind of like, who is this guy in the Winnetonka?
Who is 608 with the Winnetonka?
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, all's fair in love and recruiting, so I get to pick rolling by in this situation. Defensive lineman out of Winnetonka. This is a guy that produced at a really high level at Kip Legacy School. His head coach went to Winnetonka. He is now at Winnetonka, and if Saturday was any indication, he's going to continue to produce at a high level, even as he makes a jump up in competition and playing for the Griffins.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid that I think, had some really good battles before King of the Hill with Bailey Johnson. And I thought gave him some work, right? And he's just so long. I mean, he's got a great frame. I thought he ran pretty well too, Kevin. I don't know how he tested. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but I thought he got out of the blocks really well. And again, I think a guy that's just scratching the surface, a guy that can be coached up so much more. And I think, more work with Winnetonka and staying with that coaching staff's good for him, because I think that they can do more for him in the fall. And then college coaches are going to be able to build on that even more. He was really impressive, Kevin. And, if the picture didn't do it for you, I mean, like this kid, you talk about like kind of passing the eye test. It was an immediate, like, who is that kid at defensive line? An intimidating presence for sure.
Yeah. And I liked how coachable he was, when he would have a bad rep, Coach Cobbins over at Winnetonka would call him over and be like, hey, your hands were in the wrong place, or here's what you have to do here. And you could see him making those adjustments in real time. He wasn't hanging his head. He wasn't looking away. He wasn't upset. He was absorbing the information and then putting it into practice. And as we get into camp season, that's a lot of what coaches want to see, Ryan. I'm not saying they don't want to see guys win reps, because obviously they do. But even more than that, when you look at, they want to see the hustle. They want to see the way that you react to losing reps. They want to see how you react to hard coaching. When somebody's getting after you, how do you take it? Do you say, yes, sir, and put it into practice on the next rep? I thought he passed all of those tests as well. Like you said, I think he measured with like a 6'9" wingspan, being about 6'3", 205, all of those things, major check marks in his favor. I'm really interested to see what his summer looks like from a camp standpoint, because I think, to your point, he's going to walk in, he's going to pass that eye test. Yep. And if he continues to be coachable, if he continues to get better rep by rep, I'm not sure I'm putting a cap on his ceiling in terms of where he can go or who would give him an offer, because I do think that he checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, he's very much kind of still that ball of clay right now, and that's going to be highly intriguing.
Let's move on to 2027 and our sort of flashing picks there. We picked two different guys, Ryan, but we stuck at the same high school. Do you want to go first with your pick of Terrence Brown?
I was going to say this was by accident, and I think is a compliment to what Randy Dreiling and Steve Rampy have going over at Aquinas. Folks, if you're against if you're holding out, wanting, what's the word I'm looking for? Like hoping for the demise of the Catholic schools,
praying for the downfall.
Yeah. If you're praying for the downfall of the private schools, this is not the show for you. Cause if there's one thing we found out, and I'll get back on track in a second, Aquinas has some dudes, Liège has some dudes, St. Pius has some dudes, Rockhurst has some dudes. Look out.
There's some guys coming up as well.
Yeah. The quote privates, as we say, are not going anywhere, right? That came off really wrong. Anyway, let's move forward. The TB, Terrence Bryant, was my guy. Kevin, he was with the linebackers. I mean, that's what he plays at Aquinas. He's about 6 foot, about 180 right now. But the wingspan, right? 74 3/4 inch. So like just over 6 feet, 19.6 in his velo, and 33.5 basically vert with 10-inch hands. So I say all that, and when you see Terrence, like, he is really long and still has a ton of room to put on really good weight, and I don't think we'll lose an ounce of his athleticism. The coaches during drills were praising just how good he was at, not only was he coachable, but I think he came in, with the fundamentals that were kind of above average, right? He already knew what he needed to do and was just incredibly smooth. Coverage is his thing, right? I think as the weight comes, as the muscle comes, he's going to continue to be even better kind of up near the line of scrimmage and in traffic, because he's a pretty sound tackler when we saw him in the fall against Rockhurst and when you watch his sophomore tape. But for a kid that's, just going into his junior season, again, I'm so intrigued about where he could be from a college standpoint, because I think right now he plays a little nickel. He's comfortable out there in space. He's athletic enough to cover wide receivers. I think when you think about him in college, he might end up being a power 4 guy, and he could be a strong safety. He could be a guy that you roll down, and if you need him to cover in the slot, he can do that. Or, he can hang back and maybe hang over the top for a tight end because he's athletic enough. I think he's going to be big enough. Or you just have him be a nickel. I think he could do that too. Maybe he ends up getting enough weight where he's an outside linebacker. But Kevin, I love what he's able to do in coverage. That's his strength to me. And so I'm really excited to see him develop over these next 2 seasons. Big upside up for Terrence Bryan. He is a name you absolutely need to know in Kansas.
Well, and to your point, when you look at Aquinas and what they do in the weight room, this is a kid that's 180 pounds, but not for long, right?
Yeah.
It would not surprise me at all to see him enter this football season closer to 190, 195, maybe even 200 pounds. And then, you're looking at a guy that, hey, if he's going into junior days and stuff and he's getting measured at 6'1", 200, 6'1", 205, I think you're absolutely right in that he's somebody that could see sort of that recruitment really blossom at that point. I'm going to stick again with the defensive line and again with Aquinas, with defensive tackle Zion Thornton. Thornton made it deep into the finals of the King of the Hill competition after measuring out really well at nearly 300 pounds. He had those big, sort of saucer hands,
Yeah.
that he used really well to just absolutely batter the offensive linemen in attendance. Look, Ryan, as long as Coach Dreiling is pacing the sidelines at St. Thomas Aquinas, the Saints are going to have some absolute dudes in the trenches.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, with Zion, he's a name that's already gaining notoriety. I think already within the last month, he picked up an Iowa State offer. So, I mean, he's a kid that, training with Michael Rose-Ivy. So he's going to get absolute great technique here locally outside the walls of Aquinas. He's thick, Kevin. I mean, this is a kid that's immensely powerful. He is more your prototypical nose tackle, but again, I think showed a little bit more agility than maybe I thought he had coming into the event. So I think, there's a little bit of level of Dominique Orange maybe to him.
Yeah.
And we've seen how he progressed at Iowa State. So I'm excited to watch Zion. Both these dudes, though, Kevin, I think are no doubt FBSers to me. Give it 2 years time, give the bodies a little bit time to develop. And even with roster limitations, I think both of these kids are too good at their prospective positions and have the upside to attract FBS offers and land at the FBS level.
As we go into 2028, I want to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit for those of you watching the show, because Ryan picked out his guy. I think the second he walked in, it was kind of like, there's my kid over a Pious that I like. And then you'd see him making a catch, and he's like, that's my 2028 Pious.
I'm staking my flag.
Then he'd go through the gauntlet, and it was like, do you see him go through the gauntlet? That's the 2028 at Pious. And then did really well in reps as well. Ryan, if you want to go ahead and talk about Chase Brookings, and you obviously liked him heading in, but I think you like him even more after seeing him there.
Yeah, he's worth monitoring. He's worth watching. Again, 2028. So these are players that are going in to their sophomore seasons. Chase Brookings, I think, he's got the quarterback there at Pious to have a really nice season this year and kind of put himself on the map. This is a kid that, is over 6 feet already. I think approaching 6'1", probably 71-inch wingspan. He was over 19 and a half in his velocity. So can really cook. And honestly, I thought probably tested a little bit better than he showed the speed in one-on-ones. And yet what caught my attention is that he was able to win contested catches as a 2028. You expect the guy that's maybe a 2026 to be really good at contested catches and not be afraid and get physical. But there's Chase Brookings getting in there in one-on-ones, making contested catch after contested catch. I mean, the coordination on this kid was unreal for a kid that's just finishing up his freshman year of high school, almost 32-inch vert. And what excited me too about Chase is then, I'm going to kind of brush up before our show here. Saw him on Saturday. I go to brush up for the show to kind of look through his social media and get a little bit more acquainted with him. Unbeknownst to you and I, on Saturday, when he wasn't at wide receiver, he was throwing a neon penny on and switching over to DB. And on his Twitter, he's got some really nice clips of him as a corner, over 6 feet tall and showing the ability to flip his hips and, not clunk over his feet, which sometimes you see as freshmen, like they're still kind of growing into their bodies. He's really coordinated, really agile, and pretty long. And I love the contested catch for a young guy. So I will be keeping an eye on 2028 at St. Pius. They had another kid on the defensive line, Kevin, that you and I like, Jamel Hallman, a defensive tackle out at Pius. So Pius is going to be rolling for the next couple years. Chase Brookings will be one for me that I'll be monitoring closely.
I'm going to go a little bit off the radar from a camp standpoint and pick 2028 Israel Jonigan of Center High School. Izzy's coming off finger surgery, and so he didn't go through the position drills, but he did go through the combine portion of it. He's listed as a quarterback at center, but I think it's pretty safe to call him an athlete at this point because of his versatility, his multi-sport background, and his frame. He plays in the post in basketball and close to 6'5" barefoot and 200 pounds. He has long arms. And oh, by the way, he topped over 19 miles an hour in the rolling tens in the event, at 6'5", 200 as a 2028. Obviously that's pretty notable. Look, if he can throw the ball, great. But that combination of size, athleticism, and versatility is going to put him on radars if he can break through on Friday nights.
Yeah, I mean, Center has a couple young guys in that 28 class that, you and I were like kind of opening our eyes a little bit on Saturday of like, the Yellow Jackets, look out here. So you're right. I think with him, forget position, like throw a lot of that out of the door. Let him kind of figure out where he wants to settle into on the football field, because it seems like basketball's kind of more the preference right now. But if he settles in and can kind of transition some of what he does on the court, which is extraordinary, over to the gridiron and can, again, kind of keep those athletic traits and tests where they are right now and expand on them, get better. He's one of those guys. Everybody loves the basketball athletes, right? I mean, like football coaches love like, well, does he play football? Like even if basketball continues to be a priority, it was for Ian Premer, right? And I'm not trying to say Izzy is that guy, but like things can change in due time. And so letting Izzy kind of settle in on the football field and see where he slides in, then it'll be interesting to see kind of what he can make of that football background and build on it.
Yeah, for sure. Big frame, exciting athlete to continue to watch it and see how the football career plays out. We'll have our interview with one of our top prospects in KCMO, St. Pius linebacker Mason Wright, coming up next.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. We had a chance to talk to St. Pius linebacker Mason Wright, our top-ranked prospect at Saturday's KC Varsity Combine. He talked about his recruitment, what he's working on in his game to try and improve, and what his expectations are for this year's Pius team. Check it out.
Here at the KC Varsity Combine at St. Pius with a new St. Pius player here, Mason Wright, making the transfer over for your senior season. Let's get to recruiting. That's what everybody wants to know on our show. How do you feel like that's going for you so far? And, are you excited for what's to come here this summer?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been picking up. It's been great. I'm looking forward. I'm still working. I want more. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, this spring so far, I'm hunting. I'm working. I'm going to get more.
tell us about some of the offers that you have so far and maybe some of the strongest relationships you have with some of those offered coaches.
So I have Army, Air Force, Navy, Wyoming, University of North Dakota, Lindenwood, UNI, and Yale. And really have some great relationships with like North Dakota, Wyoming. I was just at Air Force, love those coaches. Really, I have a lot of great relationships with these coaches, looking forward to building, and it's going to be a hard choice to make.
What schools are kind of like on the horizon, maybe that have asked you, we want to see you at camp or something like that? Any other schools that you feel like could be close to offering but just need to see you a little bit more, need to evaluate you a little more? Yeah,
I've been talking to a couple schools. A big part is just going to be availability at schools now, in those larger schools. So, show up at camps and, ball out.
What schools are those that you're planning on maybe going up to camp for?
I think I'll be at Oklahoma State, KU, and then I might be up at Washington State. NDSU wants to see me at camp. So,
with Kansas, they're a school that we cover pretty frequently on the show. What have you kind of heard from them? What do you like about that program right now?
I've always been a KU basketball fan growing up, actually. So, it's just something. I got banners of KU hung up in my room, but I've talked to them a little bit back and forth, throughout my high school career, and just want to go up there, ball out, and check it out.
Are there positions that certain schools like you for that others aren't, or you feel like most schools are kind of in a general consensus as far as where they want you to play for them?
Well, I've been playing a lot of inside, outside, and edge, so I've been getting different looks. I've been seen as a true outside linebacker, as an edge at different places. Really, it's a great role to have, that I can just be versatile and I can play anywhere, really.
What do you feel like right now is your strength as a defender? And, when you're out here at combines, when you're out at camps, what's the one thing that you're trying to improve on right now?
I'd say my strength is just my physicality and my mindset. I'm big, fast, strong, and I'm going to go dominate somebody. Really just want to work on, tightening down that technique, and I want to get out here and compete every chance.
We love asking prospects this. Is there a player that you kind of model your game after? Somebody that you like to watch on Saturdays or Sundays?
I'm a big Chiefs fan, just growing up in KC, so obviously I love watching some Nick Bolton, some Chris Jones, but really, I just like to hit.
What's been your impression of Pious so far, and how do you think you guys will do this year?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, we work our butts off here. We're up here all the time, working out, getting better. It's a great culture around here. We're gonna have a great team. We work hard.
What he asked you what you want to improve on. Is there a certain drill or something out here that you feel like you do really well, where you're like, hey, this is what people need to watch because they'll get an idea for what I am?
Really, anytime you see me moving around in space, where I can close space like that. So anytime you get to see me, close space on a guy, do it, my 5-10-5, my vert, you can see I'm an explosive player and I move.
You mentioned Yale, like the Ivy League aspect of it. Is that something that appeals to you?
Yeah, so I have a 33 ACT, so it's something I've looked into. Obviously, it's a great education, as well as like the academies, so definitely something I'm looking into.
What are you looking for? Like when we say, hey, you picked this school because of blank at the end of this, what do you think that blank or that factor is going to be?
It's always going to be coaching for me. If I can't have a good relationship and trust a coach to develop me as a player, that's what I want, is go to college and develop as a player, get better. That's what I want to feel every day, like I'm getting better.
You've just heard from St. Pius linebacker Mason Wright, and that should wrap it up for us here on the show. Thanks to all of you for watching and following along with the Verbal Commitment podcast here on KCSN. If you enjoyed watching or listening, leave us a comment, like this video, subscribe here on YouTube, or hit us with the 5-star rating if you're listening on an audio platform. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.